There is a silence wrapped around your name. Not emptiness, not absence, but a pressure, as if your presence lingers even when you are gone. Libra, this silence did not appear by accident. It showed up when someone realized they crossed a line they cannot uncross. When they understood too late that what they mishandled cannot be repaired with excuses. When they became aware that looking at you now would mean looking at their own reflection, and they are not ready for that. This is not distance. This is avoidance. This is the quiet that follows shame. Some people do not apologize because doing so would force them to admit the truth, that they knew better and still chose wrong. That truth weighs heavily. It tightens the chest, it shortens the breath, it turns memories into mirrors. And right now, Libra, there is someone who cannot think of you without feeling exposed. They replay conversations in their thoughts. They pause on moments where they should have chosen differently. They remember your tone, your patience, your restraint, and compare it to who they were in that moment. This message is not here to stir anger. It is not here to reopen wounds. It is here to explain why their energy still hovers at the edge of your awareness, why the silence feels personal, and why your spirit already knows the truth before words ever arrive. Shame carries a signal, and your sensitivity feels it. Before we go deeper, gently write, "I see the truth" in the comments, not as a declaration to them, but as a confirmation to yourself. Stay with me until the end, Libra, because once you understand why they are ashamed, you will finally understand why peace found you instead. Libra, here is something very few people are honest about. When someone is truly ashamed, they do not rush toward apology. They retreat. To many, saying sorry sounds simple. But to someone drowning in shame, those words feel heavier than silence. Because an apology would force them to admit something out loud, that they betrayed trust, disrespected kindness, or took something sacred for granted. This person knows exactly where they failed you. They remember the moment they decided not to protect what you gave. They remember when they chose comfort, pride, or ego over honesty. They remember how gently you showed up and how carelessly they responded. And it is that contrast that chases them now. Shame is not just regret. Regret says, "I wish I did better." Shame says, "I am not proud of who I was." That is why they avoid you, because looking at you would mean confronting themselves, and they are not strong enough to do that yet. Silence becomes a hiding place. Distance becomes a shield. Avoidance becomes a form of self-protection. You may have felt the confusion it creates, why they vanished without explanation, why they act as if your presence no longer exists, why they behave like nothing ever happened. Libra, understand this clearly. Pretending is easier than accountability. If they speak, the truth must surface. If they face you, the guilt has nowhere to go. So instead they turn away, hoping time will bury what they could not fix. But shame does not fade quietly. It lingers. That is why you still feel their energy around you, even in absence. Why certain moments suddenly feel heavy for no clear reason. Why something in your spirit knows they think about you more than they admit. Shame binds memory to emotion. They don't remember you casually. They remember you with weight. Because you are not just a person from their past. You are a reminder of who they were when they acted against their own integrity. They may act distant. They may seem unbothered. But deep inside, your kindness stands as evidence of their failure. Libra, avoidance may look like freedom from the outside, but it is fear wearing a calm disguise. And until they face what they did, your memory will remain a quiet echo in their conscience, not asking for forgiveness, but demanding honesty from themselves. What they did cannot be reduced to a misunderstanding. It was not just words spoken at the wrong time. It was not circumstances forcing their hand. It was not timing refusing to cooperate. Libra, they felt the weight of what you offered, and still chose carelessness. They recognized safety when it was given. They sensed sincerity in the way you showed up. They knew your presence brought calm instead of chaos. And that is what makes this difficult for them now. You did not come to them guarded, calculating, or demanding. You came open. You came stable. You came emotionally present. In a world where many connections are shallow, you offered something sacred. The feeling of being seen without judgment, of being heard without performance, of being accepted without conditions. They knew this while they still had it. That awareness is painful. Because the hardest part of betrayal is not losing someone. It is realizing you harmed something pure. They were careless with something rare. And once something sacred is broken, it does not shatter loudly. It goes quiet. That quiet is what you feel now. That is why they cannot hold your gaze even in memory. Why shared spaces feel tense, unequal, heavy. Why your name carries an emotional charge they cannot dismiss. You do not intimidate them. You expose them. Your presence mirrors integrity. And when integrity stands before unresolved guilt, discomfort follows. You remind them without saying a word that they once had a chance to act with honor. They remember moments where they could have chosen differently, where gentleness from you stood in contrast to their actions, where protection was requested silently and denied. That memory stays, not as hatred, not as anger, but as awareness. They know the bond was not ordinary. They know what was broken cannot be replaced easily. They know their behavior did not match the value of what they were given, and that recognition is why shame wraps around them now. Libra, you are not haunting their thoughts. Truth is, you represent the moment they failed to rise to the level of what you offered. And that is a weight they carry quietly. Every time your name surfaces, every time stillness returns, every time honesty demands to be acknowledged. Libra, inside this person there is a quiet struggle that never reaches the surface. It is not a dramatic battle. It is a slow, constant tension. One that plays out in silence, not words. One part of them knows the truth. That part whispers, I should reach out. I should explain myself. I should take responsibility. This voice appears when the noise of the world dies down. It shows up in still moments, late at night, early in the morning, or when a memory of you surfaces without warning. But there is another voice that speaks louder. This voice is shaped by pride. It asks, what if I look small? What if they don't forgive me? What if they see me exactly as I was in my worst moment? Pride is not confidence. Pride is fear disguised as strength. When pride enters shame, movement stops. They become emotionally frozen, unable to step forward, unwilling to stay where they are. They know what is right, yet feel incapable of doing it. This is why confession feels impossible to them. Admitting fault would mean acknowledging vulnerability. It would mean placing their ego down and standing exposed, without control over the outcome. And so pride usually wins. Instead of accountability, they choose performance. You may see them act distant or cold, as if nothing matters. You may sense them suddenly busy, always occupied, always unavailable. You may notice an effort to appear unaffected, as though they have moved on with ease. But Libra, these behaviors are not proof of strength. They are signs of protection. They protect themselves from facing you. They protect themselves from answering questions that would unravel their self-image. They protect themselves from admitting that you saw them clearly and still offered grace. Here is the truth they avoid saying. They feel exposed, not because you speak ill of them, but because you say nothing at all. Your silence carries clarity. It carries self-respect. It carries closure that did not require explanation. And that kind of silence is unsettling to someone who hoped for chaos. Your calm shows growth. Your distance shows understanding. Your lack of reaction shows emotional maturity. That maturity creates a mirror that reflects the difference between who they were when they hurt you and who you became after walking away. They sense the gap. They feel it in every moment they consider reaching out and stop. They feel it in the realization that you no longer wait, chase, or explain. They feel it in knowing that any conversation now would reveal how much has changed. Libra, they are not silent because they do not care. They are silent because caring would require courage, and their pride cannot survive the truth that you already outgrew them. This is the moment where everything becomes clear, Libra. You did not break them by walking away. You broke the story they told themselves by staying whole. They were prepared for a very different outcome. They expected tears, they expected anger, they expected explanations and late-night messages. They expected emotional chaos that would soften what they did. But that is not what happened. Instead, you chose grace. You chose distance without bitterness. You chose stillness without guilt. You chose peace without needing permission. And that choice disturbed them. Because when someone hurts you and you do not unravel, there is nowhere left to hide. They could no longer blame misunderstanding. They could no longer call it mutual fault. They could no longer rewrite the story to ease their conscience. Your composure removed their excuses. By staying intact, you forced them to see the truth clearly, without distraction, without defense, without noise. And from that moment on, you became the standard. Not in a loud way, not in a boastful way, but in the quiet way. Truth always works. Every connection they entered after you began to feel thinner. Conversation felt less sincere, affection felt less grounded, emotional depth felt harder to reach. Not because others failed, but because you set a level they could not maintain. Moments that once felt full now feel empty to them. Laughter feels short-lived, comfort feels unstable. And when the world grows quiet, that absence becomes impossible to ignore. Stillness is where memory returns. In those moments, they remember how safe your presence felt, how you gave without demanding, how you listened without judgment, how you stood steady without trying to control. They realize now that they were not ready for the responsibility of your heart. What they lost was not just you. They lost the opportunity to rise. They lost the chance to become better within your presence. They lost the version of themselves that might have matched your integrity. Libra, you became proof of what was possible, and also proof of what they failed to preserve. Your quiet strength is not an accident. It is the reason they feel the weight they carry today. Because losing someone like you does not feel like rejection. It feels like falling short, and that knowing lingers long after silence begins. Not every truth arrives with words. Some truths arrive quietly, through patterns, pauses, and restless energy. Libra, silence has weight when it comes from guilt. If this person truly believed they were justified, your name would not disturb them. If they felt at peace with their choices, your memory would not feel heavy. If they had moved on cleanly, your presence would not still echo in their mind. But it does. And that is because silence is doing the work they refuse to do. Notice how they operate now. They watch from a distance, but rarely step closer. They remain aware of your life without involving themselves in it. They linger on the edges, careful, observant, cautious. This is not curiosity. This is regret wearing restraint. They hesitate when your name is spoken, not because it surprises them, but because it reaches a place inside them they try not to visit. When you are mentioned, something shifts in their body. Their posture changes, their attention tightens, their response slows. That reaction happens before thought. And reactions never lie. They grow uncomfortable, not because of who you are now, but because of who they were then. They remember how lightly they treated something meaningful. They remember the moment where care was replaced with convenience. They remember knowing better and still choosing wrong. That memory is not loud, it is persistent. And when shame cannot speak openly, it explains itself indirectly. That is why they over-explain their life choices. They talk when no one asked them to. They justify paths that were not questioned. They defend decisions that needed no defense. This is a wounded conscience attempting balance. Libra, people who are at peace do not constantly explain who they are becoming. People who are settled do not rehearse reasons for the past. But guilt tries to rewrite history until it feels lighter. And still, it fails. Because no explanation changes the core truth. That once someone sincere stood in front of them, and they mishandled it. You are not just a memory to them. You are evidence. Evidence that gentleness existed. Evidence that stability was available. Evidence that real care did not need games to survive. And when someone knows they mishandled something sacred, reminders become painful. That is why they avoid spaces where you might appear. Why mutual environments feel tense. Why casual encounters feel heavy instead of simple. You, Simply by being, remind them of loss created by choice. Libra, nothing wounds the ego like realizing I hurt something that loved me honestly. That realization does not rest easily. It follows them into quiet rooms. It waits for them when distractions end. It shows up in moments of stillness they did not expect. Late at night, when noise disappears, their mind replays small moments. Not dramatic scenes. Small moments. The way you listened. The way you stayed calm when confusion appeared. The way you gave without asking for proof in return. They remember how little it took for things to be preserved, and how quickly they allowed it to slip. In those moments, silence becomes loud. They may never knock on your door, they may never send a message, they may never admit what they did. But guilt does not require an audience. It speaks internally. It keeps score. It reminds. Their silence is not distance from you. It is proximity to the truth they cannot face. Libra, you were not erased. You were engraved. And every time life grows quiet for them, that engraving resurfaces, not to punish, but to remind them of who they were when integrity was tested. Some people confess with words, others confess with absence, and their silence is saying everything they never had the courage to admit. This may surprise you, Libra, but their apology is no longer necessary for your healing. Not because what they did was acceptable, not because it didn't hurt, but because something inside you already shifted in a way their words could never reach. An apology can acknowledge pain, but it cannot undo awareness. And awareness is what changed you. There was a moment, quiet, subtle, almost unremarkable, when everything finally made sense. Not in a dramatic realization, but in a calm knowing. You stopped asking why they did what they did. You stopped needing explanations that never came. You stopped waiting for clarity from someone who couldn't face themselves. And in that stillness, clarity arrived anyway. You began to see patterns instead of promises. You noticed how effort was inconsistent, how accountability was avoided, how emotional safety was offered by you, but rarely protected by them. That understanding reshaped you. You learned discernment, not suspicion, not bitterness, but quiet wisdom. Discernment taught you when to pause instead of pushing forward, when to listen to discomfort instead of silencing it, when to walk away without making noise. You learned that staying too long can be louder than leaving. And one of the deepest lessons you learned was this: closure does not require conversation. Sometimes, closure is the moment you stop abandoning yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Silence became your teacher. Through silence, you discovered how strong you really are. Not the loud strength that proves something, but the steady strength that protects peace. Silence showed you how much energy you used to spend explaining yourself. How often you softened truth to avoid conflict. How frequently you forgave without repair. And when silence entered your life, your nervous system began to rest. You started to feel calmer, lighter, more present. That did not happen because they apologized. It happened because you chose awareness over hope. So whether they ever say I'm sorry or not, the lesson has already completed its cycle. The growth has already rooted itself in you. And here is the deeper truth, Libra. The universe does not correct imbalance by forcing apologies. It corrects imbalance through evolution. Apologies are emotional. Growth is spiritual. Growth changes behavior. Growth reshapes boundaries. Growth alters what you allow near your heart. You grew. You stopped tolerating confusion disguised as connection. You stopped rewarding inconsistency with patience. You stopped explaining your worth. They did not grow at the same pace. They remained where pride lives, where avoidance feels safer than honesty, where regret circles quietly without resolution. And that difference is not punishment, it is alignment. Justice is not always loud. It is not always confrontational. And it does not always look like acknowledgement. Sometimes justice is separation. Sometimes it is knowing that you moved forward and they did not. Sometimes it is peace choosing you when chaos no longer can. Their shame exists not because you demanded recognition, but because you stopped seeking it. They feel it when they remember you no longer wait. They feel it when they realize you learned to walk away without anger. They feel it when they see that your life continues, balanced, steady, clear. Libra, this is the quiet conclusion. You do not need their apology because your soul no longer depends on their awareness. You healed by understanding. You recovered by choosing self-respect. You rose through clarity, not comfort. And once you grow like that, once you return fully to yourself, the universe no longer requires anything from them to restore balance. The lesson is complete. The truth has settled, and you are already standing on the other side, whole, aligned, and free. You did not lose someone valuable, Libra. What left your life was not a blessing. It was a lesson that had completed its purpose. Sometimes what feels like loss is actually release, not punishment, not failure, but redirection. This person was never meant to stay forever. They were meant to reveal something. They showed you how deeply you are capable of loving, how much patience you carry, how fully you can show up when your heart is open. But they also showed you where your limits must exist. They reflected back to you both your tenderness and your strength, both your giving nature and your breaking point. That is why calling this a loss would be incorrect. Loss takes something essential away. This experience gave something essential back. You. This chapter was never about them learning how to treat you better. It was about you remembering who you are when you stop shrinking yourself. Before this, you were generous in ways few noticed. You softened truth to keep harmony. You held space even when it was not returned. Now you move differently. Your calm is not weakness, it is mastery. You no longer react to chaos. You no longer explain your worth. You no longer meet confusion halfway. That calm is power, quiet, grounded, unshakable. Your boundaries did not appear overnight. They formed after reflection, after disappointment, after choosing yourself again and again. Boundaries are wisdom earned through experience. They mean you finally know where your energy belongs and where it does not. And your peace? Your peace is alignment. It is your inner world matching your outer life. It is your heart no longer fighting what your spirit understands. It is knowing that walking away was not abandonment, it was self-respect. They feel shame not because you attacked them, not because you demanded answers, not because you tried to expose them. They feel shame because you grew. You did not retaliate. You did not collapse. You did not linger. You simply moved forward, steady, intact, aware. And nothing unsettles someone more than realizing the person they hurt became stronger without them. Growth is humbling to those who refuse to evolve. Your evolution required honesty. Their stagnation protected comfort. That difference speaks louder than confrontation ever could. Libra, what you carried forward from this was not pain, it was clarity. You now know what aligned love feels like. You now recognize when something is safe or draining. You now trust your inner signals without apology. This experience served as a doorway, a door closing behind you, and a clearer path opening ahead. You were not pushed backward, you were guided forward. And the reason they feel shame when they think of you is because you became proof that this ending was not your downfall. It was your redirection. You did not lose your way. You found it. Libra, let this land softly. You no longer need validation from someone who could not honor what you offered. You no longer need explanations from someone who already understands exactly where they failed. And you no longer need closure from someone still circling regret instead of walking toward growth. There is a kind of victory that does not celebrate loudly. It does not announce itself. It does not seek witnesses. It arrives quietly, in the way your mind rests now, in the way your body no longer feels tense around the memory, in the way your heart stopped waiting for recognition that may never come. You won the moment you chose yourself. Not when you were praised, not when you were understood, but when you decided your peace mattered more than being proven right. That choice changed everything. You stopped carrying weight that was never meant to stay with you. You released the urge to fix what was not yours to repair. You allowed truth to settle without forcing answers. This is the quiet victory. It looks like walking forward without bitterness. It feels like clarity without longing. It sounds like silence that no longer hurts. If this message has reached your spirit, gently write, "I release it" in the comments. not as a ritual for anyone else, but as a signal to yourself that the chapter is complete. Continue walking in calm, not numbness, but steadiness. Continue choosing peace, not avoidance, but self-respect. Continue trusting that what you are becoming after loss is always greater than what you let go of. Because endings do not shrink you, they refine you. And if this space speaks to your soul, stay connected. Subscribe, not for predictions, but for clarity, grounding, and truth that supports your growth. Libra, you are not behind, you are not broken, you are not missing anything, you are aligned, you are aware, and you are free.